I still remember the way my stomach would twist every time vacation season rolled around. Every summer, my mom would be buzzing with excitement, planning trips, booking hotels, and packing suitcases. But there was always this strange, invisible line that somehow left me standing outside. My sister, on the other hand, she and her 6 kids had no trouble at all. My mom always seemed to have room for them, enough hotel rooms, enough meals, enough attention to make them feel like they were the center of the universe. But me? Somehow I was always too busy, or something came up, whenever vacation plans were being made. I grew up feeling invisible during those trips, watching from the sidelines as my sister's family piled into cars, laughed on beaches, and created memories that I could only imagine. I would sit in my room, staring at my suitcase tucked in the corner, knowing that it wasn't going to be packed. My heart ached every time I heard my mom's cheerful voice calling out, "Hurry up, everyone! We don't want to miss the ferry," while I was left quietly behind. At first, I thought maybe it was just logistics. Maybe there wasn't room, maybe she couldn't handle one more child. But the truth slowly hit me over the years. It wasn't about space at all. It was about choices. And for some reason, I was never the choice. As I got older, it became harder to ignore. I would try to speak up, to ask why I was always left out, but my words seemed to bounce off an invisible wall. "You'll get your turn," my mom would say, with that familiar tight smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Just wait, okay?" And I waited year after year. The waiting built up into this quiet storm inside me, anger, hurt, confusion, but I never wanted to let it show. I didn't want to seem dramatic or ungrateful or make my mom feel guilty. So I learned to smile from the sidelines while my sister's kids splashed in pools, built sandcastles, and posed for family photos that somehow never included me. It wasn't just the trips themselves, it was everything that came with them. The stories that my sister's kids would bring back, full of laughter and adventure, were like salt in the wound. They'd talk about late-night ice cream runs, morning walks on the beach, and secret jokes that only their little crew understood. And me? I would nod and smile, pretending to be happy for them, while the ache in my chest grew heavier. I started keeping a little notebook, writing down the vacations I imagined having, the places I wanted to see, and the memories I hoped to one day make. It became my secret world, a place where I wasn't left out, where I wasn't invisible. The other kids didn't realize it, of course. They were too young to understand why their cousin wasn't there with them. And I didn't want them to know. I didn't want anyone to feel like it was their fault, or like I was jealous. I just wanted my turn. Just once, I wanted to feel what it was like to be included, to have my mom's excitement directed at me and my adventures, not just at the bustling chaos of my sister's household. Then, something happened that started to shift everything. It wasn't sudden, it crept in slowly, like the first rays of dawn breaking through a cloudy sky. I started noticing small changes in my mom's behavior. Little comments here and there, subtle gestures that made me question everything I thought I knew. She'd ask about my week, linger a bit longer when I told her about a small victory at school, or even smile at a joke of mine that she usually would have ignored. At first, I didn't trust it. I didn't want to hope. But it was enough to make me wonder if maybe, just maybe, my turn was finally coming. And then came the moment that would change everything. A conversation I never expected. A chance that seemed impossible. My mom, the woman who had never made room for me on those family vacations, suddenly brought up an idea that left me speechless. I can still remember the exact words, though they're burned into my memory not because of their warmth, but because of the shock. "I think it's time you joined us this year," she said, her eyes flicking away for just a second before meeting mine again. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But years of being left out had taught me caution. I couldn't let myself get too excited, not yet. What if it was a mistake? What if she changed her mind? What if it wasn't really about me, but some other reason I didn't understand? My heart was a mess of hope and fear, and it made me hesitant to even respond. I could feel all those years of exclusion weighing down on me, mixing with this tiny spark of possibility. The tension in that moment was unbearable. My mom, usually so decisive and commanding, looked uncertain, like she was testing me as much as I was testing her. And me? I felt like I was standing on the edge of something enormous, ready to either fall or fly. I didn't know if this was the start of finally being included, or just another cruel twist in a story that had been unfair for far too long. I spent the next few days in a fog, thinking about what it would mean if I actually went. I imagined sitting in the car with everyone, the sun on my face, laughing at jokes, helping the little ones with snacks, maybe even sneaking out for a quiet walk on the beach when no one was looking. For the first time, I pictured myself as part of the family in a way that felt real, not imagined. But there was a catch. A problem that no one had mentioned yet, a complication that could ruin everything. And it was something that could only be solved if I took a risk. A risk that made my stomach churn even more than those years of exclusion ever had. I realized that this wasn't just about a vacation. It was about trust, forgiveness, and finally stepping into the place I had always been denied. And if I failed, if I misjudged the situation, it could push me further away than ever before. So here I am, standing at the edge of what could be the most important family trip of my life. My suitcase is packed, my heart is racing, and I still don't know if this is truly my turn, or if it's just another trick of fate. But one thing is certain. Everything is about to change and nothing will ever be the same. As the days leading up to the trip ticked by, my mind was a whirlwind of questions I didn't have answers for. Why now, after all these years, was my mom suddenly including me? Was it because she felt guilty? Or was there something else she wasn't telling me? I tried to focus on normal things, packing my bag, checking the weather, figuring out what I might wear, but every small detail felt like it carried some hidden meaning, like every folded shirt or packed toothbrush was a test. I kept replaying my childhood vacations in my head, remembering how I would sit by the window watching my sister's kids play in the yard or running around in some hotel lobby while my mom seemed to move through the chaos effortlessly, always smiling, always patient with them. And then I'd remember myself, left behind in quiet rooms, staring at a book or a drawing pad, pretending I was okay, pretending I didn't feel the sting of exclusion. It wasn't just the trips themselves, it was the message I felt my mom was sending without ever saying a word, that I was somehow less deserving. My sister didn't know how it felt. She had her hands full with her 6 kids and I didn't blame her for that. She was always the golden child in my mom's eyes, the one who could do no wrong. And her kids? Well, they were adorable, chaotic, and overwhelming, and they never understood why I wasn't there. Maybe I wouldn't have either if I were them. It was complicated, and yet it was personal. I wasn't just a cousin on the sidelines. I was supposed to be a daughter too. And yet, I'd spent years feeling like I was something extra, something optional, something that could be forgotten without anyone noticing. I started digging through old photo albums trying to make sense of it all. I found pictures of family vacations from years ago, my sister and her kids on boats at amusement parks at the beach. And then I found a few rare shots of me sitting alone on a hotel balcony, half smiling, pretending to enjoy myself while my mom hovered nearby, taking pictures of everyone else. There was a kind of quiet sadness in those old photographs that I had never really let myself feel until now. Looking at them made me angry, yes, but also desperate for something I had never truly had, belonging. At school I couldn't focus. I kept imagining what it would be like if this trip actually happened. Would my mom treat me differently? Would my sister notice me as more than just the cousin she sometimes saw? Would her kids finally see me as part of the family, not as the outsider who only got to hear about their adventures after the fact? The more I thought about it, the more I realized I wasn't just hoping for a vacation. I was hoping for recognition, for validation, for the feeling that I mattered just as much as anyone else in my family. And yet, the uncertainty gnawed at me. There were moments when I tried to push it aside, to tell myself I was imagining things, that maybe I was overthinking it. But every time I did, something would remind me of the truth. The years of exclusion, the subtle messages, the missed opportunities. Even if my mom said I was welcome now, it was hard to shake off the past. I didn't want to go through the same disappointment again, but at the same time I couldn't ignore the chance. Then came a late afternoon when my mom called me into the kitchen. The smell of fresh cookies filled the air, but I hardly noticed. She sat down across from me, her hands folded on the table, her expression unreadable. "I've been thinking about you," she said slowly, and I felt my heart skip a beat. About how I've treated you when it comes to vacations." Her words were careful, almost too careful, like she was testing them out before letting them fall completely. I wanted to respond, to ask why, to demand an explanation, but I didn't. I just nodded, waiting. She took a deep breath and continued, "I know I haven't always made room for you. I know it's hurt you, and I don't want to do that anymore." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel that relief, that sense of inclusion I had been craving for so long. But instead I felt a mix of hope and fear. Hope because maybe this was real. Fear because what if it wasn't? What if she changed her mind once the trip was actually happening? Over the next few days my anticipation grew along with my anxiety. Every time my mom mentioned packing or planning I would feel my stomach drop. I tried to be casual about it, joking along when she talked about activities or sightseeing, but inside I was tense. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, waiting to see if the ground would stay solid beneath me or if it would crumble and leave me out once more. I also noticed subtle things about my mom that I hadn't seen before. The way she would glance at me for a moment longer than necessary, or the slight hesitation when she said certain words. It made me wonder if this trip wasn't just about inclusion, but about something else entirely. Something I couldn't quite figure out yet. Was she trying to make up for years of neglect? Was there a reason she was finally including me that had nothing to do with me personally? I didn't know, and that uncertainty made me feel both uneasy and curious. Meanwhile, my sister's kids were buzzing with excitement. They had no idea that I might actually be joining them this year. They kept making lists of things to pack, activities they wanted to do, and little surprises they planned for the trip. I couldn't help but smile at their energy. It was infectious, but I also felt a pang of fear. How would they react to me? Would they be welcoming, or would they see me as an intruder in their carefully planned adventures? As the departure day approached, my heart felt heavier with each passing hour. My suitcase was packed, my itinerary was ready, and yet I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure if I would fly or fall. I kept replaying the conversation with my mom over and over, trying to read between the lines, trying to catch any hint of what might come next. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this trip wasn't just about vacations or family fun. It was about trust. It was about whether I could let myself believe that I belonged, and whether my mom was truly ready to make room for me in a way that went beyond words. On the night before the trip, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. I could hear the faint laughter of my sister's kids from the living room as they packed last-minute toys and argued over which snacks to bring. And somewhere in the distance, I could hear my mom moving around, preparing, planning, getting ready for a family she had always prioritized over me. I wondered what would happen in the morning, if everything would go smoothly, or if the old patterns would somehow reassert themselves. And then, just as I was about to drift off, my phone buzzed with a message from my mom. "Are you ready for tomorrow? I think this is going to be a special trip." I stared at the screen, my heart racing. Special trip? Was it really special for me, or was it just a phrase she used to make herself feel better? I didn't know. All I knew was that the next morning, everything could change. Or it could stay exactly the same. And I had no idea which it would be. As I finally closed my eyes, I realized that I was holding my breath. Not just for the trip itself, but for the chance to finally find my place in a family that had always seemed to have room for everyone but me. And for the first time in a long time, I understood that this trip might not just be about vacations or fun or beach photos. It might be about something much bigger. Something I had been waiting for my whole life. But what would actually happen when the car doors opened, when the engine roared to life, and I was finally sitting in the same space as my sister and her kids? Would my mom's words hold up, or would this be just another dream that slipped through my fingers? That's the moment when everything would be put to the test, and I still had no idea if I was ready for it. The morning of the trip came faster than I expected. The house was buzzing with energy, the kind of chaotic energy that usually left me on the sidelines. My sister's kids were running around, dragging suitcases and arguing over who got which window seat. My mom moved between them with that practiced efficiency she always had, checking lists, making sure nothing was forgotten. I stood near the doorway, suitcase in hand, feeling like a visitor in my own home. My mom caught my eye and smiled. There was warmth there, yes, but also a hint of nervousness I hadn't seen before. It made me wonder if she knew just how much this meant to me, or if she even understood the weight of all those years I had felt left out. "Are you ready?" she asked, her tone light, almost casual, but I could hear the unspoken question behind it. Would I handle this? Could I fit into this family space I had only watched from afar? As we drove, the car was filled with chatter. The kids laughed, told stories, and shared snacks, while my sister directed traffic from the front seat like she always did. I tried to participate, offering comments, laughing at jokes, but it felt like walking on a tightrope. I didn't know how much to speak, how much to stay quiet. I could feel my mom glancing at me every few minutes, as if measuring whether I belonged here or if I would fade into the background the way I had for so long. A few miles into the drive, my sister's youngest started whining about being hungry, and suddenly I realized how accustomed I was to being the problem solver behind the scenes. In the past, I would have quietly waited while someone else handled it, but this time I jumped in, offering to grab snacks from the bag. My mom gave me a quick, surprised glance. That small acknowledgement, the nod, the slight smile, felt like a victory I had been craving for years. But even in that tiny moment of connection, the fear remained. Would this feeling last, or would it slip away as quickly as it had come? As we approached our destination, the scenery changed from familiar streets to winding roads, tall trees, and stretches of open land that felt like adventure waiting to happen. I felt a thrill mixed with nerves. This was more than just a vacation, it was a test. Every interaction, every laugh, every glance would be measured, consciously or unconsciously, and it left me on edge. At the hotel, chaos erupted again. My sister's kids were clamoring to choose rooms, unpacking suitcases with reckless excitement. My mom tried to manage everyone at once, and in that moment, I realized how exhausting it must be to keep track of 6 kids, all while trying to include me. There was a part of me that wanted to retreat, to disappear into a corner like I used to. But another part of me, the part that had waited years for this chance, refused. I wanted to stake my place here to show that I wasn't just an afterthought. While my sister organized her kids, I helped my mom carry bags upstairs. The effort felt like a small bridge, a shared moment that reminded me of what it could mean to be included. But as we reached the floor, a subtle tension surfaced. One of the kids, the oldest, gave me a curious, skeptical look as if asking silently, "Who are you really? Why are you here now?" I smiled politely, but inside I felt the old sting of exclusion. Even in this moment of potential connection, there was a reminder that trust and belonging couldn't be rushed. They had to be earned. During dinner that night, the conflict became more apparent. My sister's kids were loud and demanding, making choices without considering anyone else. I tried to find small ways to join in, offering to pass dishes or suggest activities, but every time I spoke, I felt like I was walking on thin ice. My mom kept glancing at me, her attention shifting between me and the younger ones, as though she were balancing scales, trying not to let anyone feel slighted. The subtle tension between inclusion and neglect, past and present, was palpable. Later, as we settled into our rooms, the dynamics became even clearer. The older kids started plotting early morning adventures without including me. I could hear whispers and giggles through the thin walls, and it hurt more than I expected. I wanted to knock on the door, join in, but I hesitated. Part of me didn't want to appear desperate, part of me feared rejection. I realized that this trip wasn't just about making memories, it was about navigating relationships that had been complicated for years. I also noticed my mom growing quieter as the evening went on. She sat on the balcony, staring out at the distant lights, and I wondered what was on her mind. Was she thinking about the past, about all the vacations she hadn't included me in? Or was she worried about how the day had gone, whether I felt welcome, whether this inclusion would work? I wanted to approach her, to ask, to connect, but I didn't want to push, not yet. This was delicate territory, more delicate than I had anticipated. That night, I lay awake, replaying the day over and over. I thought about my sister's children, their easy laughter, their automatic inclusion in my mom's plans. I thought about my mom, her hesitant smile, her quiet attention that felt like a fragile bridge between past neglect and potential connection. And I thought about myself, standing on the edge of belonging, unsure whether I would finally step across or fall back into the shadows I knew so well. There were moments when I felt hope. I could imagine myself laughing with them, sharing inside jokes, maybe even being the one to calm a crying child or plan a mini adventure. But there were also moments of fear. Fear that I would never be fully included, fear that my mom's promises were temporary, fear that my sister or her kids would never truly see me as part of the family, only as a guest in their already crowded world. Over the next few days, small conflicts began to emerge, highlighting the complexity of family dynamics. One of the kids accidentally broke a vase in the hotel lobby, and while my sister tried to manage the situation, my mom looked at me and asked quietly if I could help calm things down. That simple request, trusting me in a moment of chaos, felt huge. But it also made me realize how easy it would be for things to spiral. One wrong word, one misunderstood glance, and I could be pushed back into the margins just like before. Meanwhile, I noticed tensions between my sister and my mom, subtle hints that not everything was smooth behind the cheerful smiles. My sister seemed frustrated at times, perhaps at having to share attention or at my sudden inclusion. My mom tried to smooth things over, but I sensed the strain. It made me wonder if the real challenge wasn't me or my place on the trip, but the shifting balance in the family that my sudden presence had caused. Every day brought new moments of joy and new moments of unease. A sunset walk on the beach, where we all laughed and played together, reminded me why I had wanted this so badly. But a late-night argument over bathroom schedules, or a quiet moment when I overheard my mom questioning her choices, reminded me how fragile this all was. I was learning that family vacations weren't just about fun, they were about negotiation, attention, patience, and sometimes confrontation. By the end of the first few days, I realized that this trip was testing more than just my patience or my mom's intentions. It was testing the whole family, my sister, her kids, my mom, and me. Every interaction carried the weight of years of exclusion and unspoken resentment. Every laugh, every smile, every small gesture mattered. And I began to understand that being included wasn't just about being physically present, it was about claiming a place in the heart of a family that had never fully made space for me before. As I lay in bed that night, exhausted but alert, I knew the tension wasn't going away. In fact, it was growing. The trip promised moments of joy, yes, but also moments of conflict, secrets, and misunderstandings that could either bring us together or push us further apart. And deep down, I knew that what happened next could change everything, not just for the rest of the vacation but for my place in the family forever. By the middle of the trip, the tension in the house had become almost tangible. What had started as cautious optimism was slowly giving way to nerves, silent frustrations, and unspoken rivalries. I could feel it in the way my sister barked directions at her kids a little too sharply, the way my mom's smile sometimes seemed forced, and even in the way the children eyed me, sometimes curious, sometimes uncertain. It felt like the air itself was charged, like a storm was coming, but no one wanted to speak of it yet. I tried to stay calm, to blend in, to show that I could be part of this family adventure. I helped the kids with small tasks, offered suggestions during games, and even volunteered to manage some minor disputes. And yet, no matter how hard I tried, there were moments when I felt invisible all over again. One evening, while the group was preparing for a planned outing, I suggested a small detour I thought everyone would enjoy. My idea was met with polite nods but quickly ignored as my sister insisted on sticking to the schedule. I felt my stomach tighten, a familiar ache settling in. It was like a tiny reminder that I was still on the edge of this family, still trying to push my way in. The kids' energy, which had been exciting at first, began to wear on me. Arguments broke out over trivial things. Who got the last dessert, whose turn it was to pick a game, who got the window seat in the car. I could see my mom trying to mediate, but I also noticed subtle signs of her stress. Furrowed brows, quick sighs, a voice just slightly sharper than usual. And I realized that my presence, as small as it seemed, had shifted the balance in the family. I was no longer invisible, and that seemed to be both exciting and unsettling for everyone involved. One afternoon, during a hike through the forest, a conflict finally reached its peak. My sister's kids had gotten ahead of the group, ignoring the plan we had agreed on. I tried to catch up and guide them back, but one of them snapped at me, questioning why I even needed to be included. The words stung, sharper than any exclusion I had felt in the past. I felt my heart pound as my mom stepped in, trying to smooth things over, but her tone was tense. I caught the look in her eyes. She was torn between discipline, inclusion, and trying to keep the peace. And in that moment, I realized the trip wasn't just about fun anymore. It was about testing the limits of our relationships, revealing hidden tensions, and forcing everyone to confront feelings that had been buried for years. That night, in the quiet of my hotel room, I replayed every interaction in my mind. I felt a mix of pride and anxiety. I had stood up for myself, tried to assert my place, but had I done it too much or not enough? I could feel the weight of my own expectations pressing down on me, and I wondered if I was ready for what was coming next. My mom had been watching me closely, more attentive than ever, but even her presence didn't remove the lingering doubt. Could we really overcome years of exclusion in just a few days? The following morning, things escalated even further. A small misunderstanding over room assignments led to a heated argument between my sister and my mom. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling my heart race, unsure if I should intervene or remain silent. The argument wasn't just about rooms, it was about control, about attention, about old resentments surfacing in the most inconvenient way possible. And I realized that this vacation, which I had dreamed of as a chance for inclusion, had turned into a battleground for unspoken family dynamics. I also noticed the kids were beginning to pick up on the tension. They were whispering, casting glances, testing boundaries. One of them, the oldest, even looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, as if trying to understand where I stood in this new family hierarchy. I could feel my nerves fraying, knowing that any small misstep could ignite further conflict. Every laugh, every word, every gesture had become a potential spark for drama. Later, during dinner, another incident occurred. One of the children accidentally spilled juice on the table, and my mom instinctively jumped to clean it up while also trying to calm the mess. I reached to help, hoping to contribute, but my sister's sharp tone cut across the table. "It's fine, don't bother." The words were casual, but the sting was real. My mom's eyes flicked to me briefly, a silent question of whether I was hurt or frustrated. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing a polite smile, but inside, the storm was growing. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, balancing between being helpful and invisible, included and ignored, accepted and still left out. By the next day, I realized that the trip was no longer just about family fun. It had become a test of endurance. Every interaction, every shared activity, every glance carried layers of history, tension, and expectation. I began noticing subtle patterns, my mom's protective gestures toward me, my sister's need to assert dominance, the children's shifting loyalties between adults. It was like a complex dance, and one wrong move could shatter the delicate balance we had been trying to maintain. The suspense built further when my mom asked to speak to me privately. We stepped out to the balcony while the kids played nearby, and she looked at me with an intensity one hadn't seen before. "I need you to be honest with me," she said, her voice low, almost trembling. "Do you feel like you belong here? Do you feel included?" I felt a lump form in my throat. I wanted to answer truthfully, but the fear of admitting my doubts in front of her, and the possibility of disappointing her, kept me silent for a moment. She sighed and continued, "I've tried to make space for you, but I know it's complicated. I want this to work, I really do. But sometimes, I worry that things are too tangled, too late, too messy." Her words hit me like a wave. I realized that this trip wasn't just about me proving I could be included, it was about proving that we could navigate years of hurt, miscommunication, and unspoken resentment together. That night, as I lay in bed, I could hear the laughter of my sister's kids drifting through the hallways, their joy a sharp contrast to the tension I felt. I knew that the next few days would be critical, that every interaction would carry weight, and that the climax of this trip, the moment when everything could change or collapse, was fast approaching. I could sense it, like the pause before a storm, the quiet seconds before everything explodes. I wasn't sure who would crack first. My mom under the pressure of balancing everyone, my sister struggling with her role in this new dynamic, the kids testing boundaries, or me finally confronting the feelings I had buried for so long. But I knew one thing: the trip had become more than a vacation. It was a test of love, patience, trust, and forgiveness. And soon, the situation would reach a point where there was no turning back, where the unresolved tensions would demand confrontation, and where the real stakes of being included, or left out, would be undeniable. I held my breath, waiting for the inevitable moment that would either define my place in this family or remind me of the years I had spent on the sidelines. And deep down, I knew that the next incident, the next clash, or the next revelation could change everything. I just didn't know if it would be in my favor, or if the storm we had been tiptoeing around would finally consume all of us. The next morning, everything felt different. There was a quiet tension in the air, heavier than before, as if the house itself was holding its breath. My sister's kids were still excited, but I could see subtle signs of irritation in their movements, quick glances, crossed arms, whispered complaints. Even my mom seemed on edge, moving around with that careful deliberation that made me realize just how fragile this family dynamic had become. We were about to head out for a day at the local amusement park when my mom suddenly pulled me aside. Her eyes were sharp, and there was an intensity one hadn't seen before. "There's something you need to know," she said, her voice low. My heart skipped a beat, a mix of fear and anticipation tightening in my chest. I braced myself, thinking maybe she was going to explain why I had been left out for so many years, or confess some long-hidden regret. But what she said next caught me completely off guard. "It's not just about inclusion this time," she whispered. "Something happened before this trip, something I haven't told anyone. I need you to be careful. Don't let anyone push you around, and don't trust everything you see or hear." I froze. My mind raced. What could she possibly mean? Was it something about my sister's kids? Or was it something I had no idea about, some secret that could change everything? The words left me with a dizzying mix of curiosity and dread. I wanted to ask her to explain, but her tone told me she wasn't ready to say more. And just like that, a new layer of mystery had been added, a hidden danger lurking beneath the surface of what had already been a tense trip. When we finally left for the amusement park, I could feel the shift in energy immediately. My sister was more controlling than usual, directing the kids with an edge I hadn't noticed before. My mom was quiet, a slight frown on her face as she kept an eye on all of us. And I felt like I was walking through a minefield, not knowing which step might trigger another explosion. Every smile, every joke, every small action carried weight now because I knew there was something hidden, some secret undercurrent that could change everything at any moment. The first twist came sooner than I expected. While waiting in line for a roller coaster, one of my sister's children accidentally knocked over a bag of tickets. As I bent to help, I noticed a small envelope slip out from between the straps, a plain, unassuming envelope with my name written on it. I froze. My mom had placed it there, I was sure of it. My heart pounded. What was in it? Was it a warning, instructions, or something else entirely? I slipped the envelope into my pocket, trying to act casual, but inside I was buzzing with tension and curiosity. Throughout the day, the dynamics felt electric. My attempts to engage, to bond, were met with mixed reactions. Sometimes my sister's kids included me, sometimes they ignored me, and sometimes they seemed to be testing me, watching my every move. My mom stayed close, occasionally whispering quick advice or nudging me gently, reminding me to stay alert. The envelope burned in my pocket like a secret weight, a puzzle I didn't know when I would be allowed to open. Later, as we were taking a break on a park bench, my sister leaned toward me in a way that seemed casual but carried a sharp edge. "So, you're finally joining us," she said, her voice smooth but her eyes calculating. Funny timing, isn't it? I froze, unsure how to respond. Was she hinting at something? Was she aware of the envelope or the secret my mom had warned me about? I felt the tension coil tighter in my chest, a mixture of fear and suspicion. By the evening, the second twist escalated further. As we returned to the hotel, my mom pulled me aside again, more urgently this time. "You need to be careful tomorrow," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "Some things will come out. Secrets. Things that people have been hiding, and you need to be ready for it. Don't let it shake you." I realized then that this trip wasn't just testing inclusion or family bonds. It was about uncovering truths, revealing hidden tensions, and confronting long-buried feelings. The stakes had grown higher than I ever imagined. It wasn't just about being part of the family anymore. It was about surviving emotionally, navigating secrets, and facing confrontations I hadn't anticipated. That night, I finally opened the envelope. Inside were a few small notes and photographs, snapshots of moments from past vacations I had never been part of, notes my mom had kept about interactions, warnings about certain behaviors, and a cryptic message: "Watch closely. Not everything is what it seems." My stomach churned. Suddenly, the past vacations I had longed for, the smiles I had envied, the exclusions I had endured, they all felt like pieces of a puzzle I had never known existed. The sense of betrayal, mystery, and urgency mixed into a cocktail of emotions I didn't know how to handle. I lay awake for hours, thinking about what the next day might bring. Would secrets be revealed? Would old grievances explode in front of everyone? Would I finally understand why I had been left out for so long, or was this just another layer of confusion and pain? I knew that tomorrow would be the turning point, the moment when tensions, hidden truths, and the unspoken conflicts would collide, and there would be no easy way to step back. And as I drifted into a restless sleep, I realized that the envelope, the warnings, and the tense energy in the house weren't just setting the stage for a family vacation. They were leading to a confrontation I had been waiting for all my life. The question wasn't whether I would be included or ignored anymore. The question was whether the family I had always wanted to belong to could survive the truths that were about to come out, and whether I could survive them too. The day started tense, every moment heavy with unspoken expectations. I could feel the electricity in the air as we prepared for a group outing to the beach. My sister's kids were energetic as ever, but there was a new caution in their movements, a sense that something had shifted. My mom was quieter than usual, her eyes scanning all of us as if she were bracing for the storm she had hinted at the night before. And I felt like I was standing at the edge of everything I had ever wanted: inclusion, recognition, and understanding. The first incident came sooner than I anticipated. As we were setting up towels and umbrellas, the oldest child tripped and knocked over a cooler, sending drinks and snacks spilling across the sand. Normally, this would have sparked a minor argument, but this time it ignited something bigger. My sister jumped forward, scolding the child sharply, and the child responded with a loud, defiant argument. Voices rose, tension crackling with every word. I stepped forward, trying to mediate, and for the first time, my mom didn't hover behind me or intervene immediately. She let me take the lead. That small act, that trust, made my chest swell, but it also made me more aware of the fragile balance we were walking. Then my mom pulled me aside. Her expression was serious, almost anxious. "I think it's time you see everything," she said, handing me another envelope, thicker this time. I opened it carefully and discovered letters, notes, and a few receipts that told a story I hadn't expected. One that revealed a layer of my sister's and my mom's decisions I had never known. The letters hinted at past misunderstandings, miscommunications, and choices my mom had made to protect the family in ways I hadn't realized. But there were also truths I hadn't imagined. Some mistakes, favoritism, and omissions that had hurt me deeply. It hit me like a wave. The vacations I had envied, the space I had longed for, the subtle exclusions, they weren't just carelessness. Some of it had been intentional, some misguided, and some born out of fear and exhaustion. My mom's choices had been flawed, but her intentions weren't as cruel as I had imagined. And in that realization, a strange mix of anger, relief, and empathy rose inside me. Just then, the conflict that had been simmering finally boiled over. My sister and I confronted each other, first in small, tense words, Then in a heated exchange where years of resentment spilled out. "You've always had all the attention," I said, my voice shaking. "And I've been left out, always left out." My sister's face turned red, but there was also a flicker of guilt. "I didn't realize," she said, softer now. "I thought, Mom, I thought you didn't want to be included." The words were like a key turning in a lock. My mom stepped in, her voice calm but firm. "None of this is simple. None of it is just right or wrong. But it's time we face it together as a family. I never wanted to hurt either of you." The kids, sensing the seriousness, quieted down, watching us like they had never watched before. It felt like the tension of years, decades even, was being condensed into this one moment, one confrontation that demanded honesty and courage. We talked for hours, unraveling the misunderstandings, acknowledging the hurt, and offering apologies that felt raw and necessary. The children were involved too, asking questions, seeking clarity, and beginning to understand the complexities of adult decisions. For the first time, I felt fully seen, not just included in the vacation but included in the story of my family, in the decisions, mistakes, and love that had shaped our lives. Just when I thought we had reached a sense of resolution, an unexpected twist arrived. My mom pulled out a small box from her bag, a surprise she had kept hidden even through all the revelations. Inside were tickets to a weekend getaway, but not for everyone. The tickets were for me. "I wanted to show you," she said softly, "that there's always room for you, that you matter in ways I've been too slow to show." I stared at the tickets, stunned. The gesture was simple yet powerful, an unspoken promise that the past didn't have to define the future. But as I looked up at my mom, I noticed a shadow of worry in her eyes, almost as if she knew that even with this gesture, there would be challenges ahead. And I realized she was right. Rebuilding trust and connection doesn't happen overnight, but in that moment I felt hope for the first time in a long time. The day ended with us sitting together on the beach, the sun dipping low into the horizon. The kids played nearby, laughter echoing against the waves, and I felt a fragile but real sense of belonging. My sister smiled at me, not perfectly but genuinely. My mom rested her hand lightly on mine, a small but meaningful touch. And I understood that inclusion, love, and trust weren't just about shared vacations. They were about facing truths, embracing imperfections, and being willing to step into vulnerability. As the sky darkened, a final twist revealed itself quietly but sharply. One of the kids ran over, clutching a small, tattered journal I hadn't noticed before. Inside, scrawled in tiny handwriting, were notes and drawings that suggested the children had been aware of some of the secret's intentions all along. Their innocence hadn't shielded them. They had been processing, interpreting, and even judging in their own small ways. It was a reminder that family, no matter how complex, always sees more than we think, and every action, every word, echoes further than we realize. I closed the journal slowly, feeling the weight of everything that had happened over the trip. The conflicts, the revelations, the apologies, and the gestures of inclusion, it all came together in a way I hadn't dared to hope for. Yet the story didn't end neatly. There were lessons to carry forward, wounds to continue healing, and trust to rebuild every day. The vacations, the trips, and the gestures were not just moments. They were openings, invitations to a new chapter in a family story that had always been waiting for me. And as I looked at my sister, my mom, and the kids playing in the last light of the day, I realized that even with resolution, life had a way of surprising you. Inclusion wasn't a single moment, it was a journey, and the next chapter could come with joys, conflicts, and unexpected twists that no one could fully predict. But for the first time, I felt ready to be part of it, fully and unapologetically, knowing that this time I wasn't just on the sidelines. After that day on the beach, things slowly began to shift. The tension that had weighed on all of us seemed to loosen just a little, though I knew that rebuilding trust and connection was never instantaneous. My mom, my sister, the kids, and I began to navigate this new dynamic with a mix of care and curiosity, like stepping onto a path that was both familiar and unknown. The children, once hyperactive and unpredictable, started including me naturally. It began with small things, letting me pick a game during a board game session, asking my opinion on where to set up towels, sharing snacks without me prompting. Each gesture, no matter how minor, felt like a bridge being built, connecting years of distance and misunderstanding. I realized that belonging didn't come from grand gestures alone, but from countless tiny acknowledgments that added up over time. My sister and I spent long moments talking, sometimes quietly, sometimes with the kind of animated energy only siblings can have. We shared stories about past vacations, laughed at the chaos of our childhood, and admitted the mistakes we had both made in recent years. For the first time, I saw her not as someone who had overshadowed me, but as a person navigating her own fears, frustrations, and responsibilities. That perspective didn't erase the past, but it helped me see that inclusion was not about competition. It was about understanding and empathy. Mom and I also shared our own quiet moments, away from the children and the noise of vacation life. We sat together during early morning walks, watched the sunrise, and talked about what had gone wrong in the past, and what we could do differently moving forward. She admitted that her decisions had sometimes been misguided, and that she hadn't realized how deeply my exclusion had affected me. I told her about the feelings I had kept inside for years, the loneliness, the frustration, the yearning to be seen. And in that conversation, I felt a weight lift, a sense that our bond had grown stronger, more honest, and more resilient. The trip wasn't without challenges, of course. Arguments still flared up, small mistakes still caused tension, and the kids' energy was exhausting at times. But we had learned to navigate those moments with more patience and awareness. When conflicts arose, we talked them through instead of letting frustration build silently. When misunderstandings happened, we acknowledged them openly. And slowly the family started to feel like a unit, not perfect but real, with room for mistakes, forgiveness, and growth. One evening during the last night of the vacation, we held a small, impromptu bonfire on the beach. The children danced around the flames, laughing, shouting, and playing in the sand. My sister and I built sandcastles with them, the kind of simple, chaotic joy that reminded me why family vacations had always seemed magical from afar. Mom sat nearby, her eyes soft, a small smile playing on her lips as she watched all of us. For the first time, I didn't feel like a guest in my own family, I felt like I belonged. As the fire crackled, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The envelope, the letters, the whispered warnings, they had all been part of a larger lesson about honesty, trust, and patience. Inclusion wasn't something that could be demanded or rushed. It was something built over time, through effort, attention, and care. And while the road to true connection was still ahead, we had taken the most important steps together. I also realized that the vacation had given me insights about my own resilience and voice. For years, I had stayed in the background, waiting for permission to be seen. But now I understood that claiming my place required courage, persistence, and vulnerability. Speaking up during conflicts, participating in family decisions, and standing up for myself hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. And in doing so, I had not only found my place in this vacation, but a stronger sense of self. My sister and I shared one last quiet moment before bedtime, sitting on the balcony and looking at the stars. "I'm glad you came," she said softly. "I didn't realize what I was missing all these years. I guess we both had a lot to learn." I nodded, realizing how true it was. Family wasn't about perfection, and vacations weren't about idealized fun. They were about connection, communication, and sometimes confronting uncomfortable truths. Mom joined us, holding a small box of mementos from the trip. She handed each of us a simple keepsake, a seashell, a photograph, and a note expressing her love and pride. When she gave me mine, she whispered, "You've always mattered, even when I didn't show it right. I hope you know that now." My throat tightened. Those words, simple as they were, felt like closure, recognition, and a promise for the future. The children, sensing the calm and warmth of the moment, climbed into our laps, sharing hugs and giggles. The playful energy that had been chaotic at the start now felt inclusive and affirming. I realized that belonging wasn't about having control or being the center of attention or avoiding conflict. It was about being present, being seen, and being willing to participate fully in the messy, beautiful reality of family life. As the trip drew to a close, we packed our belongings with a lighter, calmer energy than when we had arrived. The previous chaos and tension were replaced by laughter, shared stories, and an unspoken understanding that we had crossed a threshold. We had faced the conflicts, navigated the secrets, and emerged stronger as a family. And yet, I knew that this was just the beginning. Trust, inclusion, and connection were ongoing journeys, and the lessons from this vacation would continue to shape our relationships long after we returned home. On the ride back, my mom and sister exchanged smiles that spoke of forgiveness, growth, and new understanding. The children slept, exhausted but happy, their small hands curled around stuffed animals and souvenirs. I sat quietly, looking out the window at passing scenery, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. I had been included, recognized, and embraced, not just in words but in actions, choices, and shared experiences. And as the car rolled closer to home, I thought about what I would take from this trip. The lessons weren't just about family, they were about life, relationships, and self-worth. I had learned that inclusion wasn't about waiting for someone else to decide. It was about claiming your place with courage and patience. I had learned that forgiveness and understanding were powerful, that conflict could be navigated with honesty, and that even after years of feeling invisible, change was possible. The final twist came quietly, almost as if life wanted to remind me that surprises never truly end. As we pulled into the driveway, I noticed a small note tucked under the windshield wiper of the car. It read simply, "The journey doesn't end here. Keep growing. Keep connecting. We're proud of you." My mom had left it. My sister and I smiled at each other, understanding that family, love, and belonging were always evolving, and that this trip, with all its conflict, tension, and revelations, had been only the first step in a lifetime of shared experiences. I stepped out of the car, feeling the solid ground beneath my feet, but also a lightness in my heart I hadn't known before. I looked at my family, the laughter of the children, my mom's watchful smile, my sister's tentative yet genuine expression, and I knew finally that I belonged. Not because someone had made room for me, but because I had found the courage to step into that room, claim my voice, and embrace the messy, imperfect, and beautiful reality of being part of a family. And in that moment I realized something else. Belonging isn't just about vacations, gestures, or words. It's about showing up, confronting the hard truths, and choosing connection over distance, every single day. The past was no longer a weight, it was a guide. The future, uncertain and full of possibility, felt like home. The vacation ended, but the story, the journey of inclusion, understanding, and family growth, was only beginning. And for the first time, I knew that I was ready for it, fully, unapologetically, and with hope that had finally found a home.